COV families. This week, the story that we're going to be reading is called The Girl No One Wanted. And this is the story of Jacob, Rachel, and Leah from Genesis chapters 29 through 30. If you want to read along with me, I'll be starting on page 70. There were once two sisters. The youngest sister was very beautiful and her name was Rachel. But the oldest sister wasn't beautiful at all. Some thought her quite ugly, and her name was Leah. Rachel was the kind of girl who always gets invited to parties and chosen for the team. Everyone loved her, and poor Leah, no one hardly even noticed her. One day, her cousin Jacob came to stay. He was one of Isaac's sons, and he was on the run. Jacob had stolen and cheated and made some enemies, including his own brother, and now he was hiding. The funny thing is, Jacob, of all people, was the one God gave the special promise to, the same promise he had given his grandfather Abraham. I will rescue the world through your family. But then God chooses people we least expect, as we'll see. Jacob stayed a long time working for his uncle Laban. One day Laban said, "Jacob, I've decided to pay you for your work. What do you want?" A sudden thought struck him. How about one of my daughters?
Jacob looked at Rachel and he looked at Leah. Who would he choose? Of course, he chose Rachel. "I'll work for 7 years for free," Jacob said, "if I can marry Rachel." So Jacob worked 7 years, and at last his wedding day arrived. But that night, Laban played a nasty trick on Jacob. Instead of sending Rachel to marry Jacob, he sent Leah. Now, in those days, they didn't have electricity, so it was dark in their tent, and besides, women wore veils, and you couldn't see their faces properly. So Jacob suspected nothing. The next morning, Jacob woke up and screamed. His new wife was lying beside him, but it wasn't Rachel. It was Leah. Jacob jumped out of bed. "Laban!" he cried. "You scoundrel!" But Laban said, "Work with me another 7 years, and you can marry Rachel." So Jacob worked for Laban another 7 years, and at last, Rachel became his wife. Now Jacob had 2 wives, but his 2 wives, Jacob loved Rachel the best.
"No one loves me," Leah said. "I'm too ugly." But God didn't think she was ugly. And when he saw that Leah was not loved and that no one wanted her, God chose her, to love her specially, to give her a very important job. One day, God was going to rescue the whole world through Leah's family. Now, when Leah knew that God loved her, in her heart, suddenly it didn't matter anymore whether her husband loved her the best or if she was the prettiest. Someone had chosen her. Someone did love her with a never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love. So when Leah had a baby boy, she called him Judah, which means, "This time I will praise the Lord." And that's just what she did. And you'll never guess what job God gave Leah. You see, when God looked at Leah, he saw a princess. And sure enough, that's exactly what she became. One of Leah's children's children's children would be a prince, the Prince of Heaven, God's son. This prince would love God's people. They wouldn't need to be beautiful for him to love them. He would love them with all of his heart. And they would be beautiful because he loved them, like Leah. In the story, we heard that Jacob was tricked into marrying both Leah and Rachel. Our Bible verse shows us how Jacob felt about this. It says, "His love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah." Genesis 29:30. At the end of our story, though, we heard that Leah felt loved by God, even though Jacob didn't love her as much as Rachel. So knowing this, let's read the Bible verse together one more time. His love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah. Genesis 29:30. The story of Jacob, Rachel, and Leah from Genesis chapters 29 and 30 may be new to your children and might require reading through it a few times, either in the Jesus Storybook Bible or in your own Bibles, so any questions can be talked through. So our activities this week are on the simple side to leave more room for family discussion. Our nursery children will have this page to color. While they color, you can talk about the characters in the picture: Jacob, Leah disguised as Rachel, and Laban. But that night, Leah played a nasty trick on Jacob. Instead of sending Rachel to marry Jacob, he sent Leah. Our preschool children will have this maze to complete. They can color it in first if they wish, and then help Jacob make his way through the path of sheep to Rachel. While they work their way through the maze, you can talk about Jacob working 7 years for Laban before marrying Leah, and then having to work 7 more years before finally marrying Rachel. But Laban said, "Work for me another 7 years, and then you can marry Rachel." So Jacob worked for Laban another 7 years, and at last Rachel became his wife. Our elementary children will have this stack-a-word puzzle to sort out. They can color the sons in before starting if they wish, and then try to correctly fill in the 12 sons of Jacob. Let me give you a few clues. I always start these kinds of puzzles by counting the number of letters in each word that I'm trying to fit into the puzzle. So for the 12 sons of Jacob, I'm going to count each one's name. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And I'm just going to put a 6 right next to Reuben's name. And I'm going to do that for each one of the people. 2, 3, 4, 5. This one also has 6. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so go down the list and first count all the letters in each person's name. Once I count the letters in each word and put the numbers next to the words, like this, then I see if any of the words has a number of letters that is unique. So if you look down at this list, both Reuben and Simeon and Joseph all have 6 letters in their names. But if I keep looking, Levi is the only one that has 4 letters. So then I'm going to look down through the puzzle until I find the one that only has 4 letters. So if I count these boxes, it has 1, 2, 3, 4. So I know that's where Levi's name is going to fit. And if I write his name in, I see the next name's going to start with an I. And there's only one of those right here. So then I can write that name here. And then I will just try to build all of the names from there. Good luck! While they work this puzzle out, you can talk about any names in the list that they may recognize. Judah was mentioned in the story this week. So when Leah had a baby boy, she called him Judah, which means this time I will praise the Lord. And that's just what she did. One of Jacob's other sons is important in next week's story. Maybe you can talk about him to prepare.